for anyone who follows the TikTok page. This is the You Think You Know Sports podcast, and this is the very first podcast. So if you're joining me today, you probably came over from TikTok, and I appreciate you greatly. We have over 10,000 followers there. People have asked me to create a podcast, something they can listen to while they're working out at the gym, and I still plan to keep the TikTok page going. There's a lot of information that I have and a lot of stuff that I want to do on this page. But I did want to start a podcast and get this actually started for anybody who wants to talk sports, hear sports 24/7. As you all know, I have a sports background, worked in the newspaper business for many years, still do as a contractor, but ran some newspapers in Alabama and Georgia. And for a few years was an editor, started as a sports reporter. And I just have always loved college football, the NFL, and college basketball, and that is how the TikTok page started taking off. And we're getting ready for the fall. It's May 5th, 2026 today. And so I wanted to talk about college football today. And look, I love to talk about all of college football. So my idea is to have a podcast episode on every college football team before we begin college football season and to get into all kinds of topics. So the one today may not be that interesting to you, but I hope you learned something. I want to talk about the Boston College Eagles. Now, how did we decide that we're going to do Boston College for the very first podcast ever on the You Think You Know Sports podcast? Great question. Well, the ACC would be the first conference when you look at ABC order, and Boston College would be the first team in ABC order in the ACC. So that's how we ended up with the 2-10 Boston College Eagles as the first team we wanted to talk about on the You Think You Know Sports podcast. So let's get into this. Look, BC, as I just said, not great last year. They were pretty good the years prior to that. Won 7 games. Head coach Bill O Brien is now in his third year with the Eagles. He's 9-16 so far at Boston College, and they have not had a winning record in conference play since 2009. Look, I don't know how many of you remember this, but a couple years ago, Bill O'Brien coached, I believe it was his very first game at BC. They played Florida State, who was coming off an undefeated season before losing to Georgia in the bowl game, didn't make it to the playoff. Florida State had already lost to Georgia Tech in a game in Dublin, I believe. But they played Florida State on Labor Day night and beat them. Thomas Castellanos, who later became the quarterback for Florida State, pulled the upset. Bill O'Brien was being interviewed by Scott Van Pelt on ESPN Sports Center, and I was like, my goodness. This Boston College team under Bill O'Brien, with Thomas Castellanos at quarterback for the next couple years, is going to be something to deal with. Obviously, we know what happened after that game. We know it was not perfect for Boston College. Castellanos moved on. But this team has not been great since then. They've won 8 of the 24 games they've played since then. I kind of fell for it a little bit again last year. Dylan Lonergan at quarterback. He had 8 touchdown passes in the first 2 games of the season. One of those was an FCS opponent, but then against Michigan State. And I was like, my goodness, watch out for BC. They've got the offense going. They've got Bill O'Brien as head coach. It took a year, but here they go. Dylan Lonergan was a guy who had started his career at Alabama. Well, it fell off the rails quickly. He only threw 4 touchdown passes the rest of the year. He is now at Rutgers, and Boston College will see him early this year. But we're going to get to the schedule in a minute. So what do you do if you're Boston College, if you're Bill O'Brien, if you're this Eagles team where it is probably not the easiest place to recruit? I don't know how you would rate all of the Power 4 teams, but I would say getting someone as far as a top player to come to Chestnut Hill and play for a BC team that has not been nationally relevant in some time would be pretty difficult on the recruiting trail. They decided to take a chance on the guy who's likely going to be their quarterback, Mason McKenzie. Now, there are 3 guys still in the mix. They've got a true freshman. Now, they've also got Grayson Wilson from Arkansas who's in the mix. But Mason McKenzie from Saginaw Valley State, he was the conference player of the year last year. He had over 4,000 passing yards, 31 touchdowns, 17 picks. He's the guy that I expect, based on everything I've read, to be the quarterback, but Bill O'Brien doesn't have to make that decision now. It could be Grayson Wilson, could be one of these other guys who's going to end up being the quarterback. Regardless, there's only one offensive player back from last year's team. And sometimes you have addition by subtraction. Obviously, the team was not great last year. No hard feelings or anything meant, no ill intent toward the guys who are no longer there. But the only guy back on offense is Michael Krauts, an offensive lineman. He was 606th in Pro Football Focus's rankings as far as all offensive linemen last year. So obviously not a super elite lineman, more toward a average offensive lineman as far as PFF grade. Sometimes PFF doesn't nail its grades. We'll see if Krauts can be a big part of turning this thing around for BC. We're going to get to the running game in a minute, how important it might be. Defensively, they have 4 starters back. While we're on the returning starters, they have 5 overall. The most notable is really KP Price. Price was an honorable mention all ACC team last year for Boston College. And he's the only one. He's the only guy back that can say that. They have 3 defensive backs. Carter Davis, Isaiah Ferris are also back. Chris Marable, as the defensive lineman, also returns. Now, if you're the quarterback for BC, there's a good chance you're going to be behind a lot. Unfortunately, that's what we saw last year. They threw the ball 57% of the time. That's the 10th most in all of college football and the most in the ACC. Now, the year before, they were in the 40s, the low 40s, as far as pass play percentage. Bill O'Brien would love to get back to that. Now, part of that was having a quarterback, and Thomas Castellanos, that had wheels. He would run, and you had to get him down, right? He wasn't a huge guy, but he was definitely shifty, would make people miss, and obviously that's a huge part of the running game. We will see if they get any kind of quarterback running game this year as well. We do know, though, that they've got Evan Dickens over from Liberty, the running back who was 3rd overall in rushing yards, who is now coming over to be probably the starting running back for this Boston College team. They also have Jackson Wade, who transferred over from Florida. He was a preferred walk-on at Florida, played 62 snaps last year, most of those on special teams. And he is stood out in the spring. If you read anything from the BC folks, the beat reporters up there, as well as the athletics page for Boston College. The schedule is going to be interesting. And before I get there, I do want to mention Ted Roof is going to be the defensive coordinator. I think that's a good thing for BC. Mike Hart has come over, the former Michigan running back. Some of you might remember Mike Hart running the football at Michigan if you're as old as I am. They also added some interesting guys. Anthony Polano from Washington State, Bodie Calhoun from Notre Dame, and then Chris Jones from Georgia defensively. We'll see if any of those guys are standouts to go along with the 4 guys they have back on defense. The schedule, they play 4 of their first 6 games at home, okay? They open with a road game, all right? So they play 4 of 5 at home after that. The road game is at Cincinnati. Obviously there's no Brendan Sorsby for this Cincinnati team. We may not even see Brendan Sorsby at Texas Tech with the gambling stuff going on, but we'll see. Then you get Dylan Lonergan, who's probably going to be the starting quarterback at Rutgers, and he's coming back to BC on September 11th. That is a Friday night game for BC, the second week of the year. They host Maine the following week. Then they play Virginia Tech. They have a game at SMU, which is their second road game on October 3rd. They have a bye week before they play Pitt on October 17th. So, again, those first 6 games, your home games are Rutgers, Maine, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. You play road games at Cincinnati and at SMU. So, I believe BC can be fairly competitive in those games. You're getting a James Franklin Virginia Tech team in year 1. I think the trip to SMU, Kevin Jennings is back. That SMU team has ACC championship aspirations. That'll be an interesting, tough challenge for this Eagles team. Rutgers, look, they were pretty good offensively last year. We will see if they can be just as good this year in a Friday night game, Friday night opener in Chestnut Hill, 6 days after playing at Cincinnati on September 5th. That will be a quick turnaround, but at least it's at home. The problem, I think, is the last 4 games for this BC team. Because while 4 of the first 6 are at home, 4 of the last 6 are on the road. They play at Georgia Tech in Atlanta on October 24th. They play at Duke the next week. They get Florida State, comes all the way to Chestnut Hill on November 7th. Then they go to Notre Dame, host Syracuse, and play at Miami. So 2 of your final 3 and both of your final 2 road games are at Notre Dame and at Miami, teams that expect to be in the college football playoff. That is as tough of a challenge as you could have to end the year. So, not saying that you never know what's going to happen and how good these teams are going to be, but that feels pretty daunting for a BC team that went 2-10 last year. Boston College has not beaten Notre Dame specifically since 2008. Now, they beat Miami in 2018. We just now really saw the Hurricanes get back to national relevance under Mario Cristobal. The last time they won versus Cincinnati was 1996, which I thought was interesting. Look, it's going to be an interesting year for them. The question I have really is, what does Bill O Brien have to do to still be the head coach going into the next year? Does he have to get to a bowl game? What is the expectation there for Boston College as he tries to rebuild this program to get better on defense and just to be, in general, more competitive than they were last season after they got off to a pretty decent start, it felt like, with the 2 wins out the gate, or the 2 very high-scoring games, and then all of a sudden things went off the rails very quickly for BC. So, look, we're going to continue all of these previews around the college football world. Again, it is May 5th. A lot is going to change. You never know about injuries, who's going to come on as we get closer to the fall. I go live every day on TikTok, 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern, Monday through Friday, looking to expand that to other outlets as well. But wanted to get this first podcast up. We're going to have one on California soon as we continue going through an ABC order of the ACC. Hope to see you on that podcast as well. Thank you for listening to podcast 1 of the You Think You Know Sports podcast. See you on the next one.